Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Glad to be joined by my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. And also what a privilege it is to have on as this week's guest, an absolute legend of the game. She's won 18 major singles titles. She reached the semifinals or better in 52 of the 56 majors she played, including the semifinals or better of 34 consecutive majors. Entered from the 1971 U.S. Open through the 1983 French Open. You know her from her work from Tennis Magazine, along with her commentary on ESPN. Please welcome to the pod, Chris Evert. Chris, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Steve. This is going to be fun.
It will so be. Before we get started, I know Steve has something to say about that 34 semis or better streak. There you go, Steve.
Chrissy, here we go. This is going to be like old times because I want you to tell me who broke the streak. You went all the way from your first major at the U.S. Open in 71, the great match against Marianne Eisler, saving the 6 match points, losing to Billie Jean in the semis. And from that point on, as David just mentioned, through the French of 83, you never lost before the semis. So you went to Wimbledon in 83. Who spoiled the streak?
Kathy Jordan.
I'm shocked.
I remember my loss. I don't remember my wins. I remember my losses. But can I just say, I have an excuse for that loss.
I was going to say, tell David, because I well remember the reason, but tell David and the listeners what happened.
Well, and at that time I never said a word, but of course now, when you get into your 60s, I think you can say anything you want. You have free reign to say anything you want. Nobody can judge you. But I had a good friend of mine, Kathy Smith, was staying with me at Wimbledon, and she was like queen of the fitness world, and she was taking some vitamins because she needed niacin. She was depleted of her niacin, and she was taking an extra amount. So the night before I played, I was happy. I was in the kitchen. I saw all of her little vitamins together. And I go, I didn't even know that, you could overdose on niacin. So I took too much niacin and I just was speeding around the house, flushed all over. My heart was palpitating. And then I finally got sick to my stomach all night. And, I overdosed on niacin. And what can I tell you nowadays? You probably can't even take niacin. I don't know with the the laws. I mean the rules in the tennis world, but it just shows you. I learned a big lesson. You just can't take vitamins or minerals that you don't know anything about. So anyway, the next day I had I felt like and I just had no energy, and Look, I don't think Kathy Jordan will care that, if I talk about it now, but I mean, at the time it wouldn't have been nice to talk about it.
But the other thing that David, that Chrissy, I think probably doesn't remember is that if she would have won that event, it would have been 4 majors in a row. You were in that was a unique position. You'd won the 82 Open, and then you'd won the Australian, the end of the year. Beat Martina in the Australian, then came and won the French, and now this was a chance for 4 in a row. So that was a really serious mistake.
Well, it was a serious mistake, but chances were I wasn't going to win Wimbledon if I had to play Martina, because as you know, Steve, she had my number on grass, and she beat me so many times and had such a great grass court game. And I don't think I probably would have given myself like a 20% chance to beat her. So, it is what it is. I like that picture behind you, by the way. The Steve Flink, is that the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that, Chrissy. We're gonna get to that.
Good. No, you placed it just perfectly, Steve.
Yeah, we're that's strategic planning by our part. We're gonna get to the Hall of Fame stuff in a little bit. All right, we got the painful stuff out of the way. All good stuff from here on out. Chrissy, I know 2022 was a challenging year for a lot of people, including yourself. You look great, by the way. I just want to ask you, obviously you went through a challenging year. How are you feeling health-wise?
Jeez. Yeah, it was quite a year. It was a lot of surgeries and chemotherapy. And, I just, at my age, I think you can probably react a little bit, bounce back a little bit quicker when you're younger. So I was tired, most of the time, but no complaints, because, I'm 100% clear of all cancer right now. And I have the BRCA gene, which had a mutation. And so that affects, not only the ovaries, but also breast cancer. And I've had an MRI and I'm clear in both areas. So it was a tough year, but I've been blessed with great health my whole life. Why should I be any different than any other person, in their 60s or whatever? Look what's going on with Martina now. And it's just, when you get older, you have to realize that these things can happen. And that's why you just have to be vigilant and getting all of your, just making all of your yearly appointments and getting genetic testing. And, I just learned a lot about being proactive in the health field.
Well, like I said, you look great. You look fantastic. And thank you for sharing that. And prayers up again to one of your really good friends. And we're going to get to that as well in this conversation, Martina. I mean, between both of you, two of the strongest people out there, no doubt. You're on the up and up, and she's going to be on the up and up very soon as well, too. So
she will be. Yeah.
Before we dive into, I want to transition a little bit into your relationship with Martina, and that's going back to that Friday night in September with Roger and Rafa. And to me, I want to hear your thoughts, maybe talk about the differences, your relationship with Martina, that Roger and Rafa had during their careers, because that Friday night at Laver Cup was a culmination.
Laver Cup. Okay, I was trying to think what Friday night you're talking about.
I apologize. That Friday night in Laver Cup. Yeah, okay. I apologize for that. That Friday night in Laver Cup was a culmination of an unbelievable friendship, with both of them playing on tour. Obviously, that friendship's going to continue. In an individual sport like tennis, it's got to be so difficult to be really, really close with someone who's as close as the top of the rankings. You're both competing for the highest of stakes. You and Martina did not have that relationship during the most competitive years. That developed a lot later. For Roger and Rafa, you just don't see that, especially in an individual sport. Maybe you get it if someone's ranked 1 and someone's ranked 100. Maybe that person isn't as much of a threat, and maybe you're able to break those walls down a little. But both these guys were competing at the highest of stakes. How crazy and great was that to see? And then talk about how your relationship with Martina was a little bit different and developed later.
Boy, that's a loaded question. First of all, it was great to see Rafa and Roger, a very touching, very emotional moment. And Roger was a big, ingredient in Rafa's career. And I think like Martina was a real, a big thing in my career, as far as our rivalry sometimes overshadowed our individual accomplishments in that rivalry, because I think it brought, different people into the game of tennis, people that weren't tennis oriented. It brought the outside people who were just fascinated with the different personalities, the different, styles of tennis. So, I mean, a lot of similarities. Rafa was a baseliner like me, and Martina and Roger could do everything. And I think, Rafa was mentally probably a little tougher than Roger. And, I kind of prided myself on the mental strength in my game, because I wasn't the physical athlete a lot of these women were. So it was unbelievable. But, it's interesting. It's interesting that you said that, but I don't know, I don't know the history of Rafa and Roger in the beginning of their career or the middle. I don't know if anybody remembers. I think they got closer at the end, just like Martina and I did, because after a while, you're the only ones left in the locker room on a Sunday. You're in the finals and you're the only two. So you kind of, at one point you look over and you see that that person's a human being. You know, they're just not a tennis player. They're just not your competitor. They're not the enemy. They're a human being. And, you know, their family, they have families, and they have loved ones, and they have faults, and they have strengths. And after a while, it's like, you just kind of look at each other and you kind of laugh, you know, because it's really, you know, it's really, as I get older, it's really silly not to be friends with your opponents. I mean, it really is. Life is too short. It's a game. It's a sport, for heaven's sakes. So Martina and I, you know, for 18 years competed against, and like I said, met in the finals or semis Saturday and Sunday. We'd be in the locker room, and we'd have to talk about each other in the press room all the time. We play each other. And, you know, she's got it. Hopefully she sees this in me, but what I see in her is, you know, especially at the end, when I open myself up to actually looking at her as, you know, a human being, she's got a big heart, and she's a good person, and she speaks her truth. And, you know, all of these things, it took me a while to really see, you know, the person after competing, because I kind of put myself in a little shell. I was the kind of player that didn't really want to get too close to my opponents. But when I finally opened up my heart to her, you know, we were, and we, at the end of our career, we were able to separate the two on the court and off the court. And maybe I was a little immature in the beginning and couldn't separate the two.
It's developed into an amazing friendship, obviously. And I want to now get into your rivalry with Martina. I'm going to really pass this to Steve, because he knows it as good as anyone outside of probably you and Martina. You know, you played 80 times, included 60 finals. I'm going to just pass it on to Steve. He'll dive deeper into this one.
Chrissy, I don't know how many, a lot of us have said, I've never heard you talk about this, but I know Bud Collins felt this way. I know Mary Carrillo feels this way. I know a number of other people in the sport and people, sports followers outside of tennis, who think that your rivalry not only is the greatest tennis rivalry, men's or women's, that we've had, but that it even surpasses the likes of Yale-Harvard football, which is celebrated every November. Historic Ivy League rivalry, the game they call it. Ali Frazier in boxing, where they had 3 really memorable battles. There are a lot of people that really, and I include myself in that category. How do you feel when you hear about comparisons like that, and how do you put the rivalry into context? Because we're looking at 14 major finals, 22 meetings in the majors altogether. As David just said, 80 altogether. Martina won 43, you won 37. Both of you had dominant stretches. Put it into context from your perspective, someone who lived it.
Well, first of all, the first question, I mean, that you asked is, how do I feel about it? I'm honored, you know, very honored to be amongst those rivalries. I can't say, you know, it's like, who's the greatest player of all time? I mean, you can't really, to be in that group is enough for me, and is, you know, I take a lot of pride in that. As you know, I don't follow other sports that well. I really wasn't in the trenches with, you know, the football and the boxing rivalry was, no, that was actually, was that in the 60s, 70s? I was probably
70s, yeah.
But Muhammad Ali, got me the biggest name in sports ever. So I feel very, very honored. And I think that, you know, one thing Martina and I did do was like I said, we brought new eyes into the sport and new ears. And, you know, people were talking about our rivalry, and people were taking sides, and she had her set of fans, I had my set of fans, and they'd all come together. And you know, it was, that rivalry transcended tennis, you know, just very much like Serena Williams has transcended tennis, and, you know, Roger and Rafa have transcended tennis. I mean, great rivalries are great, or great champions are going to elevate the game and going to change it and enhance it forever. And I'm just so happy. I mean, I can't even imagine not having had that rivalry with Martina, I don't know what would have happened to my tennis. I don't know if I would have gotten bored, retired early, fizzled away. I mean, I don't know what I would have done. That is such a major part of my career, my memories of tennis. And, you know, I'm just so thankful that we had it.
Steve also wanted to, Steve and I were talking about this before as we were prepping, and he had an interesting thought. Obviously you played Martina a lot more than you played Steffi, but Steve, I know you wanted to ask her about when Chrissy competed against Steffi and how she felt about those.
Well, yeah. I mean, you had it really, it was interesting. Because I do want you to compare a little. Martina and Steffi are obviously considered right up there among the all-time greats, and
Yeah.
neglected by many when the talk is about Serena, but they're right in the conversation. So just
Yes.
wondered how you felt about what it was, who was the tougher one at their very best almost on a surface by surface. I know it's hard, but like take
Yeah.
it even on different surfaces, Steffi on clay, Martina on grass, hard courts. It's very hard for you to compare, but you were able to see Steffi climbing the ladder and then surpassing you at the end. And didn't play her nearly as many times, 13 meetings, and you won the first 6, you won the last 7. So you were watching her improve significantly. And I still remember, by the way, you saying to me, and David, we would have these off the record conversations, and Chrissy was in Florida and had just lost to Steffi. And we were walking along toward the interview room, and she turned to me and she said, "What are we going to do about this girl?" Yeah, because you were so impressed with that, and you would do that. You would be honest about what you were up against. So compare the two of them as someone who competed on such a high level against both and had so many memorable matches against both.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, when I think of the all-time greats, I think Serena, Steffi, Martina, the three really stand out. Steve, you know, I think my game was at my best and at their best. My game was, I had more success against Martina because, you know, she had a great serve, but I had a great return to serve, and I had great passing shots, and she had her backhand was the weaker side, and I could just keep hitting the backhand. And I just feel like my game was for success was better suited playing her. Steffi, I thought I was going to say to you, how the heck am I ever going to beat this woman? Because she was better than me in every aspect. You know, she was a better athlete. She had a big forehand. She had a big serve. She moved beautifully. And she came up at the end of my career when I was like, you know, she came up at the end of my career. The last, I think my best tennis was really when I was around 30, 28, 30 to 30. And I retired when I was 34, and Steffi came at the end of my career. So I was kind of going down, she was coming up, and she, so I got her really in Martina at different times in my career. So
I would also add, just from the outside looking in, Chrissy, like
Yeah.
when you have a contrasting style like you had against Martina,
Yes.
there's areas where you can go and attack versus when you're with someone who has a similar style, but they're just maybe better than you
little bit
at
better,
that same style. That's a bad matchup.
You're absolutely right. I had my strengths could sometimes go into her weaknesses, and with Steffi, it was like, I mean, if I were to say one weakness, the only side I felt comfortable with hitting to was the backhand, because she would just slice. But I mean, even the slice was great and it was low, but at least it didn't blow me off the court. But her forehand did, and I could pretty much diffuse Martina's, as great a forehand as she had. I could diffuse that. And on clay, on clay, it was easier for me to play Martina than it was to play Steffi. I expressed that very poorly, but
No,
I get
that's
it.
clear, but tell us, I'm not asking you to take a bold stand here, but in a way, I guess I am. But in this, you just alluded to it. Yeah, most people are sort of looking at Serena, Steffi, Martina, and that's the debate. And well, let me just put it in this sense. There were a lot of people at the Open when Serena bid farewell that were kind of automatically giving it to her. As a longtime observer, that disturbed me a bit, that there was nobody else in the conversation. That when the announcements were made for Serena to come out on the court, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest tennis player of all time, Serena Williams, as opposed to arguably or perhaps. So as someone like you, Chrissy, who believes so much in consistency and prided yourself on your own consistency, don't you feel that the two of them were more consistent than Serena, that's part of the argument?
This is my answer when people ask me this, because this is like a tough question. Serena at her best was Serena at her best was better than anybody. Was better than anybody. But if you're saying who has the most accomplished career, I think Steffi and Martina have a more accomplished career. I think where Serena excels is just the number of Grand Slam titles, but that's not everything. That's Martina played singles, doubles, mixed. Martina won more tournaments than anybody. Steffi won the Golden Slam, 4 Grand Slams and the Olympics. Steffi, some of those years were dominant when she was number one. So I think every generation has better players, Steve. I mean, sorry, but
any sport, Chrissy, you can make that argument in any sport.
I remember Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals, and he was the greatest ever. And then 20 years later, the women are breaking his record. Okay, women swimmers were breaking his record. So it's just logical with all the science and the physicalities and all this new information coming out about how to be in better shape and how to train better and how to think better, to be smarter on the court, percentage tennis. I think with all that information, every era has that luxury of being better because of those elements that I just named. And so I've seen Serena play some matches where I thought, okay, I mean, she was overpowering her opponent. She was acing, greatest serve ever. She was consistent. She was focused. She was, disciplined and constant. Everything clicked for her. And I'm like, nobody in the past could have ever beaten her at her best. And I stand by that. But
that'd be a fun match to see. Steffi versus.
And in saying that, I applaud Steffi and Martina because I think they had more accomplished careers in the sense that they played more, they were more consistent, they won more.
Now
that would be fun. That would be fun, Steve, seeing Steffi at her best play Serena at her best.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Chrissy, to kind of get back to in a way, you kind of leading into my next, you've almost answered it already, but I want you to answer it anyway. And that's as follows. You had 7 years at the top, if we it was starting in 74 and the last one was 81. So your biggest years in a lot of ways were in the late 70s, were in the 70s into the early 80s. And then Martina and you were number 1 and number 2 year after year. But don't you believe, looking back at the way you played, that you actually were a better player in the 80s than you were in the 70s, despite the fact you didn't have as much success? And explain why. Graphite racket.
That's the point. That's the point I want to make. I mean, I was number 1 in the 70s, but I was a better player in the 80s, and I wasn't number 1. Maybe at times I was number 3 or 4, because Monica was starting to come up and Steffi, and then there's Martina. So 100%, I think that players push one another to a higher limit, to a higher level. I think you're as good as your competition. So in other words, if you have really good competition in your era, then you're going to become better player. You're going to become a better player because you're going to be pushed more, and you're going to realize that you've got to change a few things, maybe put a little more topspin on shots, maybe put a little more power behind your serve, maybe improve your movement. I mean, I think you learn more from losing than you do from winning. And when you're winning and you're coasting along, I don't feel like that's when I improved. I improved more when I was losing, because it just hit me in the head like, God, if I'm going to ever beat this girl, I better change a few things, and I better work on my game a little bit more. We could work on my weaknesses. My serve was mediocre. I could work on that. I could work my movement, could get better. And I worked on that. So, but you're right. I played, just my last 2 French Opens, I think, was some of the best tennis. I played 85 and 86.
True. Well, very well stated, Chrissy. We will talk about a couple storylines coming up in this year's Australian Open. But before, I think the listeners would be interested in your friendship with the other person on this column, Mr. Steve Flink, because you guys go back quite a long ways. I mean, you wrote a foreword for his book. You were a huge part in his induction to the Tennis Hall of Fame in 2017. And I'll let you and Steve kind of play off this together. How did your friendship start, and how did it all begin? Because I know you guys are still close. Both of you are still close to this day, obviously.
Well, Steve is my memory. Steve Flink is my memory. He would go into press conferences with me, and I would be asked a question about a previous match or a score, and I would have no clue. And I turn to him and I go, Steve, what can you answer that for them? And so Steve was my memory. But I remember him early, just the beginning of my career at Forest Hills, and okay, Steve, I'm going to ask you, what year, was your first year of being a journalist?
Well, I was, 73 was when I was breaking in. And that's, of course, when I interviewed you at Roland Garros. David, I interviewed Chrissy at the 73 Roland Garros. This will give you an idea of how different things were back then, players and press, and how the whole thing was handled. At this point, Chrissy didn't have an agent. She's, she's playing her first French Open. She gets to her first major final there. She's still 18 years old. And I'm trying to break in as a reporter. I'd met your mother. You didn't know that, but I had. I'd met your uncle. Your uncle, Joe Sinnott, had become a pal. Used to have lunch with him in New York, and he was always raving about you. But I did this on my own. I was over there, and I was staying with a family, and I just came up to you after the quarters, and I said, can I do an interview with you for World Tennis Magazine? And you said, all right, after the match tomorrow, just come by the court. You just told me to meet you walking off the court after this, which I did. And David, it was very funny. She said, I met Chrissy after the match, and we started walking back toward the lounge, and you won't remember this. You said, okay, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Well, turn into a lifetime of friendship here.
You were laying down the law of the land. You said 10 minutes. I said, fine. And I took 22 minutes.
I was all business back then, wasn't I?
Yeah, but you let me have my time. Once you saw that the questions were reasonable, we, as so often is the case, I think you lost track of the time, and I didn't really look that closely either till the interview was done. But that became my first published piece, and in the magazine, the August issue of 73. But I'll let Chrissy comment on this, David. But then I think over time, Chrissy knew that how much I knew about her record, and I had this memory, and I could bail her out of these situations in press conferences if she didn't know. But also there was a rapport, and there was a certain kind of mutual respect that developed, because she saw that I was very passionate about the sport, and also saw I was very sympathetic to her, because as the friendship was growing, Chrissy was going through in the 70s, there became the dominant force, and it really hurts you. Actually, you probably don't remember it that well now, but in the period of, say, 75, 76, when the crowds, they didn't turn, they weren't nasty, they weren't vitriolic, but they did root a lot for your opponents. And you'd go to those indoor tournaments and they cheer for your opponents.
I know.
And you would speak, and we got into some conversations about this, David, that weren't interviews, they were just phone conversations. And you would kind of vent with me, and I would just say to you, look, there are a lot of people out there that care. Don't lose sight of that. These people are rooting for the underdog.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. But I saw a side of you that I don't think a lot of other reporters had seen. You were talking that way to me. You would never have said that in a press conference.
No.
But I found that I was very sympathetic to that, David, that somebody as great as Chrissy, who carried herself the way she did, had that sensitivity in trying to figure out why the fans would do that. And it wasn't easy because you were, of course, conducting yourself with a lot of dignity out there. You weren't antagonizing the fans, but they weren't always that kind. Maybe not nasty, but not that kind.
Well, so like I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that obviously I understand now, but and when you're kind of sensitive and you're like, why are they against me? And you're young, but now, after a while you understand if you're number one, they always want to see a match. They want to see the underdog do well. They feel sorry for the person who's playing the dominant person. No, I understand that, but so, and just, Steve, I remember him in the early 70s and going at Grand Slam events, and we had, it wasn't just a reporter player relationship. We were friends, and, I could sense that he was pulling for me. But what I really liked about Steve is when he was a prominent, writer for World Tennis at that time, what I really liked was that he was very fair when he wrote articles about my matches with Martina or my matches with Steffi. And, he was not, his writing, you wouldn't know, it wasn't slanted, it wasn't tilted in my favor. He was very fair to both players. But I always, look, we were buddies. He liked my tennis. I think he liked my style. I think I'm pretty conservative. You're pretty conservative. And, and I think it just, you like you said, you got to know my family and it was a great relationship. It still is, I think that's the sign of a good relationship is that you still have it even after you retire, and we've kept in touch and I thank you for all the support you gave me over the years. I appreciate it.
I appreciate both of you.
David,
I appreciate both of you going into it. Steve, I know you have some more thoughts.
Yeah, no, Chrissy's right. And I think it grew out of mutual respect. But where she's also right is I didn't have to worry, not only with the writing, Chrissy, but sometimes with the television. I would be on the air calling the matches for Madison Square Garden Network at the women's championships in the Garden. And sometimes I had to say things like, Martina's really picking on Chrissy's second serve. Look at this. She's actually chipping and charging off her first serve. I would say these things because it's my job. Yeah. And you might kid me later about that stuff, but you understood. So that, I think it worked out really well, is that I could do my job. I could be professional. I could be dispassionate in those situations, but then we still could enjoy the friendship.
Yeah. No, I appreciate both of you talking about it because I know there's years and years of friendship there. So thank you both for sharing. Australia, it's coming up really, really soon. And there's some storylines. And obviously on the men's side, Novak Djokovic, right? Last year, it was just a whole debacle with everything that happened. He's obviously in Australia now. He's looking as strong as ever. Even if Carlos Alcaraz was in the field, unfortunately, he had to withdraw because of injury. Even though Carlos is number one in the world, I think everybody still thinks Novak is the best player in the world. In Australia, is he the strong favorite, Chrissy, to take another title in Australia? He's won the thing a bazillion times.
Yeah, I think he's a favorite. The thing about Novak is, in his game and in his physically, mentally, and emotionally, there's no weakness. He's so strong in all three, and very rarely is a player like a 10 out of 10 in all three of those when you check them off. It might be 10 here, 8 here, 6 here, whatever. But the way that Novak can, number one, sustain great tennis, and the way that when it gets close, he goes to another stratosphere. When it gets close, 9 out of 10 times, he's going to pull out the tie break, or he's going to.
Oh, I say to Steve all the time, I don't know if he has the best tiebreak record in history, but he's the most clutch tiebreak player in the history of the game.
The most clutch player, period.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's down 2 sets to love, and he's down 2 sets to love, and he's up a break in the third, he's going to win the match. It's like he's so dependable and reliable, and he's still.
And I say to Steve on the tiebreakers, Chrissy, the 3 things that I always focus on is he will not miss. 2, he gets aggressive at big targets, and 3, he'll make the opponent eventually go for something that the opponent is just not comfortable doing, and eventually will cause an error. And he does that time and time and time again in tiebreakers. And he's unbelievable in those moments.
But also, it's unbelievable too, to me, Christy, the other day. I mean, he played in Adelaide, a great semifinal against Medvedev. And then he's playing Korda for the first time. And Korda played a tremendous match against him. But there's Novak at match point down, coming to the net, putting away an overhead. He eventually wins the tie, plays a perfect tie break, and then closes him out in the third. But you could see, he was agitated. He was out of sorts. He was annoyed with himself for sort of chiding his box. He wanted somebody to leave his box after the first set because he was so upset with how he was playing. And he kind of apologized to them in the presentation ceremony. But it seems to me that even when he's in that state, gets back to your point about the 3 areas of mental, physical, and emotionally, that he still finds a way. He even on days when he's irritated and just not happy with how he's playing. And he was not entirely happy with how he played against Korda. Is that another trait? Because that's something you had and all the great players have, winning on your bad days as well as your best days.
It happens so quickly, the transition. He can be playing badly, and he could be, wanting his player box to, sometimes he'll say, get up and show a little more excitement or leave or whatever. You can tell he's getting upset, and the match will go on. And then something happens where he hits one great shot, or the opponent makes 2 errors in a row. And boy, you can see that match switch around in no time.
Yeah.
No time. And Serena used to do that too. Serena did that very well. She did that very well. It's like, you play Serena, same thing, and the player would play so great. Oh, setting the break. Oh, but you never counted her out, because it would just be 1 point and that yell, and you knew she was going to win the match. And I think it's the same thing with Novak. I don't know, he really gets himself in such a mental state of discipline and focus like nobody else. And, I just think he's different than any other champion. I think I've never seen that high a level of emotional and mental brilliance, discipline and focus. I really haven't seen that in any other player.
Well said. Steve, I know you have some thoughts on the women's field as well, 2 players in particular.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk, Chrissy, about Australia. And I mean, looking ahead to, without even focusing on 2 players, let's just talk about the field and your thoughts going in. And number 1 with Swiatek. She lost in the team competition pretty badly to Pegula. We've seen some more ups and downs as opposed to the first half of last year, where she was unbeatable and won 37 matches in a row. Yet she still seems to be the one to beat. And the second one I would single out. The other one I'm also fascinated to hear you talk about is Ons Jabeur, who's always so much fun to watch. Whether or not maybe this can be the breakthrough after she gets to 2 major finals last year. But talk about the 2 of them, but then the field and how you assess it going in.
Well, when you said.
I'll
when
just
you
say
said-
the draw is not out yet. As of this recording, the draw is not out yet.
The draw's
So-
not out. Yeah, Iga, I'm sorry, she only played one tournament, right? Before the Australian. I mean, that's like, she's only
Yeah,
played
she-
one,
Yeah.
right? Before the Australian. So it's hard to really, gauge where she is. I mean, Jessie Pegula played the match of her life. And I mean that I'm admiring the way that she played. She took it to Iga, and I haven't seen any players do that, where she played Iga's game better than Iga. And she got ahead in the point, and she was the aggressive one, and she took her chances and made everyone. And Iga, like you said, Iga was, very upset and emotional, but I still think Iga is the favorite. I mean, I think she's the favorite. And I think if she plays Jessie again, she will have learned from that match, and it might be a different result. But kudos to Jessie for it was unbelievable tennis. Reminded me of the Simona match at Wimbledon against Serena. I mean, it was a perfect match. It was a perfect match. Ons, I was reading some of her press conferences, and she's very, very positive about, I came so close last year, maybe should have won a major, but I came so close, and I'm ready. I've waited long enough. I'm ready. I'm tired of getting to the finals, and definitely she's got a good shot at it. I don't think you can count her out. I like the way Jessie is playing Pegula. I liked the way Madison Keys looked, and I liked the way Coco Gauff looked.
She just won a tournament. Really, pretty straightforward.
It's a new year. Everybody's fresh. Everybody's put in their training. Maybe some of them have different attitudes. Maybe some of them are hungrier now than they were last year. And just like the state of women's tennis the last 10 years, I think it's still unpredictable. I still think there's, you can't, before it was always, there's only one or two players that could win in different eras. But now, I mean, there's, I mean, say this, but from past history in the last couple of years, it's like 15 players could win a major, which is, you just wouldn't think that would be possible, but it is.
Didn't happen
Chris,
in
you
your
want
era
about-
versus Martina. There wasn't 15 players with you and Martina. There was two.
Or Steffi and, or when
Monica.
Steffi was playing, and it just was, it was either one player dominated, like Serena pretty much dominated. Serena didn't have any rivalries really in her career. She dominated, or there would be a Steffi Monica, or a Chris Martina, or, Billie Jean, Margaret Court, or, there would be specific rivalries. But now it's all open to, and what is the reason for that? I mean, that is, I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
don't you think that it's hard to pinpoint, but at least with Swiatek last year, we saw her win a couple of majors. I thought that was a good thing for the women's game. The majors were divided, but she got on the board twice and won her second French and won the US. And somehow I think that's a good thing when we can have the top players winning more than one major in a year. And I thought that was good. But Chrissy, your thoughts on Coco? People have been in kind of a hurry to see her develop. They forget how young she is. How do you feel about her temperament, the way she carries herself on the court, this serenity that I think seems always surrounded? Don't you find that appealing as well as her game? Talk about the person and the player.
Well, I'm a big fan of hers all the way around, her tennis and the kind of person. I'm so impressed with her as a person, when she speaks, and she's, very supportive of certain causes. And I mean, she really is very, she's very thoughtful about certain issues, and she's just not a tennis machine that just plays tennis. She's thoughtful in other aspects of her life. I think her parents have done a great job. She comes from a really solid, stable family environment, and boy, that helps. And as far as her tennis is concerned, yes, people have been, is this going to be the year? People have been trying to rush her because she just came out with a bang at Wimbledon when she beat Venus. It was like, oh my God, this girl could win a major in 2 years. But it's been what, 4 years? And if I'm right. And
Yeah.
she is one of the 10 or 15 definitely that could win a major. She's getting bigger and stronger, and you can tell she's doing a lot of work in the gym because she's really looks strong. And I think it's helping her, the movement and her power in her game. But it's just hard. It's just hard to tell. It's hard to tell. I like that the improvement has been gradual. She's working so hard. She's got a good coach. She's got, everybody's telling her the right things. And she is improving gradually, which is probably the healthiest way to improve. And when she's ready, to go get it, which it might not be a physical thing as much as a emotional, mental thing. When she's ready to go get it and bring, win a slam, she will. She will, but I see her winning multi slams. I don't see her just, there've been a couple players in the past that have won one slam, and it's hard for them to win it in their second one. And I think once Coco wins one, though, I see her winning a handful.
No argument from Steve or myself on that analysis right there. We appreciate your time. We've been going for a while. The last topic we just want to talk about is a little bit of the transition to tennis commentary. And my question for you is, was this something that you sought out after your playing days were over to start trying to commentate and get with networks? Or obviously you were so accomplished in your playing career. Did networks try to seek you out, or was it sort of a mutual thing?
Yeah. I had a manager, Bob Kane, at that time. And that was, Jimmy Connors was transitioning into TV and after he retired. And because I remember I worked with him at NBC, and I worked with John McEnroe at NBC, and it was the thing to do. It was good money, and it put you out there. And according to an agent, it was like good. It was a good thing to do. And I remember working for NBC, and I was horrible. I got, first of all, there's no training. They just put you in front of a camera, and this was probably whoever I would have gone with, ABC, CBS, or any, it's not NBC in particular, but anybody. They just expect you to just kind of rattle off all these, pearls of wisdom. And, well, when I was playing, this is what I was doing. But it's hard. It was hard. I don't know. You're really not getting any direction. And I think Mary Carrillo was the one that really changed commentating, because all of a sudden Mary comes along, and she's witty, and she's funny, and she's knowledgeable, and she has the stories, and she's, it's like, oh my God, now she's like the Serena Williams of broadcasting. So we all joke about it, Martina and I, and Tracy and Lindsay, and all of us who were, tennis players that turned broadcasters. We look at Mary and we go, you can go out of the room, just leave, but we're kidding, because we all respect her and try to be more like her when it comes to commentating. But it's changed a lot. So anyway, I was awful in the beginning. And then I think that having a tennis academy for 20 years, I think that I was learning so much from the coaches at our tennis academy about the new tennis, the top spin and the Western grips, and, the kick serves, and all the things that we didn't have in our day. And I think that I kind of learned the current tennis game and the techniques and the strategies. And so I had more information in my mind. And then I had a second go with ESPN, and they sought me out, and I said, okay, I'll try Wimbledon 1 year, just to see if I like it. And I really enjoyed it. And so, I'm just hanging in there, hanging by a thread, but I'm still with ESPN.
But you know what? Chrissy's leaving out one thing here. It was very difficult for you to retire in '89 and then jump into the booth, and you knew all the players, you were still so close. It naturally made you a bit inhibited about being critical of players. And I think the second go round, what's really helped, I think, is you had some distance from it, and you naturally evolved into more of a journalist, analyst, journalist. You weren't afraid to criticize constructively, and I think that's one of the reasons why you improved. You're also being a little hard on yourself to say you were horrible back then. That's excessive criticism, but
that's okay. I own it. I mean, I wasn't that good. I wasn't that interesting. I just would say the things that were obvious that were happening on the court. But, then it got into with ESPN, it got more into, they were very, Jamie Reynolds is our producer. And he was like, really remember how you felt when you walked on center court at Wimbledon, and really express that. How does that feel? What is going on in your mind, in your body? And then also when you win, what does that feel like? So he, I finally had a producer that would, give me some advice as to insights that I could portray to the audience. And boy, it really helped a lot.
But Chrissy, what about, in addition to that, the challenge of working with a Chris Fowler or a Patrick McEnroe or a John McEnroe or a driver? There's so many other player analysts, different types of people in the booth. How have you had to adjust your approach to work with the different announcers so that you're comfortable in getting your points across with a different partner in the booth?
Well, we all like each other. We all like each other, and we all respect each other, and we're a team. It's not like a competition anymore. I'm not competing against them. They're not competing against me. We really genuinely like each other. And there's never been any two people that haven't gotten along on the ESPN roster, which I love. We support each other, and we leave our egos at the door. And when we walk in, and we try to just have conversations. It's not like, okay, I'm going to one up you on this and this. We try to just have conversations about different thoughts and different things that we're seeing happening on the court. But certainly Chris Fowler with his credentials, Chris McKendry with hers. I mean, she's our studio host, and and these are really pros, and we're amateurs compared to them. So we continue to learn a lot from them.
And how much do you learn? Do you go back after these telecasts? Do you have a sense immediately after leaving the booth, I think I really did a good job on that one, or God, I was a little off my game this time? Do you know immediately, or do you have to hear from a Jamie Reynolds or somebody back at the trucks? Do you know it in your heart right away?
Yeah, I know if I do good work, and I know if I'm flat, and I know if I'm not having a good day. But yeah, if I know when I'm doing good, well, I mean, because it's the messages I'm getting across are very genuine and very insightful. And, I just try to describe my emotions and my feelings and what I'm seeing on the court. I try to give, we all former tennis players do have wisdom and do have experience of a lot, that versus if someone's commentating and wasn't a player, and so we can bring that to the table. But I know, I get a feeling, I don't need anybody to tell me you did a great job. I mean, I don't need that. I just need to feel good inside, and I'm happy if I do a good job, and I'm really disappointed if I'm flat and the thoughts aren't coming as quickly, so I'm competitive with myself maybe, but it's just because I want to do good work. And I want to, and you just feel like, look, the stars are the players, the stars are the match, but you do feel responsibility that you want to try to enhance the match a little bit. And you want the viewer to enjoy also what they're hearing, much as what they're seeing.
Very well said. Thank you. We've been going a long time, Chrissy, and we appreciate your time. Something that we normally don't do is we talk about personal stuff on this podcast. We normally stick to tennis. And I've been privileged to know Steve for a number of years now. And now, Chrissy, you've obviously known Steve for a lot longer than me. And we both got to know how Steve feels about his father. And we've heard so many great stories that Steve has shared about his father. For those that don't know, Steve's father recently passed away. And while it's obviously very, very sad, this is also a celebration of an amazing, amazing man. Made it to 98 years old. And Steve, I'll leave it with you to say a few words about truly a remarkable, remarkable man.
Well, it's interesting because Chrissy and I were texting the other day, and she said, how are you doing with your father's passing? And I said, well, I have my moments. You know, I find myself can start to break down a little here and there, but overall I'm holding up well. And she said, you know, you got to remember you had him for a long time, you know, and that sort of put into perspective for me, along with my own thinking, that if you can live to 70 and still have your father alive with you and in good shape most of that time, alert and informative and just so inspiring, I have nothing to complain about. And I'm also happy for him that he had such good health for about 95 of those years. And the last 3 were not bad either, but there was almost nothing until he was 95. So, and the other thing I just want to tack onto that is he was so important to me in becoming a reporter, because he was a reporter, not a tennis reporter. He was an all-purpose. He worked for Life magazine. He worked for the Today Show. He did things in the media that were really outstanding, and he was a very gifted writer. So as I was getting into the business, he was such a big help to me, you know, critiquing my pieces, and he introduced me to Bud Collins when I was 17. So all of these things are what I remember now, and what I'm so grateful for is, and having had him as a father. Very fortunate.
Beautifully said, Steve. And for those that want to see the obituary in the New York Times the other day was beautifully written, and you could see it's just a snapshot of the accomplishments that Steve's father accomplished in his life. It was truly remarkable. And Steve, thank you for sharing that, both with Chrissy and myself, and obviously the listeners. With that said, Chrissy, thanks again for spending time. And Australian Open is just around the corner. So thank you. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Enjoyed it.